Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Senator Elena Parent. I serve as the chairwoman of the Senate Democratic Caucus and have always, throughout my legislative career, been a staunch defender of democracy, voting rights, and that has led me to be a supporter of ending the extreme gerrymandering games that we see unfolding around the country. These have dramatically escalated in the last year, starting with President Trump's June 2025 orders to Texas to redistrict their congressional maps to, quote, gain 5 seats. Both political parties have been engaged in a destructive, anti-democratic race to the bottom. Make no mistake, this started because President Trump is concerned that voters will deliver a rebuke to his leadership in the November 2026 midterm elections. And as January 6th clearly demonstrated, he is perhaps not the president most in our history that is committed to democratic ideals. He gets his guidance more from power at all costs. This led him to say, look, we can get these 5 seats. Y'all go into session and redistrict Texas. That, of course, was immediately countered by the state of California, led by Governor Gavin Newsom. California has an independent redistricting commission, but feeling that Democrats could not let such a blatant undemocratic power grab go without a response, Gavin Newsom set a process in place where the voters of California voted to lay to the side their independent redistricting commission for the next election so that Texas's, which was a Republican power grab, would be countered by voters of Democratic persuasion as well. And then it spread rapidly after that. There are a lot of states, both Democratic and Republican, that have and still are engaging in this gerrymandering process, to include Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Maryland. And an important point here is that this shows very clearly the dangers of modern redistricting. It is important to note that until the era of technology and widespread information on voters that every company has and all the social media companies have, it was not possible to draw districts with such precision. Americans need to understand that we are not in the old era, where both parties were gerrymandering, a process I still abhor, but it did not have the functional capacity that now is embedded within the technological ability to precisely target each voter, because they know exactly who you're probably going to vote for, and draw every single district for an almost certain desired outcome by the map drawer or the political party or the incumbent, not by the voters. And if that doesn't, and what that means is that there is not a functioning real democracy when those practices are in place. Because no matter what the voters do, they will have been sorted by those in power, by the elites, the ones that they're supposed to hold accountable, to have their vote silenced. So really, it's truly a crisis in this modern era. Rigged districts undermine a healthy, functioning democracy because it demonstrates to the public that their votes do not count. Fewer of them then come out to vote, leading to a death spiral in the trust that Americans have in their elected officials and their government. And we know from history that when the citizenry, when the elite ruling class is separated from the desires of those that are supposed to have power at guiding the policies of this nation, we know what can result. We have fought for many years here in Georgia. Democrats have fought for many years here in Georgia to put in place an independent redistricting commission. Georgia is a purple state. We are the exact type of state where it would make all the sense in the world for neither political party to be in control. And politicians that do not care about what the voters think and want power at all costs are not fit to be holding seats here in the Georgia General Assembly or in Congress. But what are the voters supposed to do? They can't throw them out if they've already been sorted into rigged districts. There is no response. It's gone on and on for decades, accelerated in the last 20 years with technology, turbocharged in the last year by the Trump administration. It has got to end. And what we can do, if the independent commission is too much for my Republican colleagues to bite at right now, as they enjoy the spoils of unified power under the Gold Dome, we can start by leading the way in this country to ban mid-cycle redistricting. This exercise, this sideshow has alerted more and more Georgians to the actual power that lies in the computers and not in the voting booth. Georgians are opposed to gerrymandering efforts. They understand it, and they understand it more now. Georgia wisely chose not to engage in this race to the bottom, and I commend the Republican leaders of our state for declining to do so. It would make all the sense in the world then, having declined the opportunity to grab even more power, because make no mistake, our districts are heavily gerrymandered already, to pass the bill that I have sponsored, or the bill that Representative Draper has sponsored, who will speak after me. The one in the Senate is SR 558, and lead the nation in banning this destructive mid-cycle redistricting efforts. President Lincoln once said, "Don't change horses in the middle of the stream." The same principle should apply here. Let's stop this charade. Let's stop accepting that politicians or political parties should be able to steal elections, choose their voters, and cling on to power. I am proud to stand here with Fair Districts, one of the groups that has done more than almost all others on a volunteer basis to try to restore the principles of democracy under this Gold Dome. But before we hear from them, I would like to turn it over to my dear colleague, an excellent voting rights expert herself, Representative Syra Draper.
Oh my God. Perfect. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Syra Draper. I'm the state representative for House District 90. I am an elections attorney, and I'm very proud to be the sponsor of House Resolution 1033, which I will speak about today. I just want to thank you. I just want to say thank you to Fair Districts for being here. I'm so grateful for the vigilance that they are showing on these matters. There has never been a more important time to demand accountability from our politicians and to really demand integrity in our elections and the strengthening of our democracy. The redistricting process is fundamental to our democratic process. When I first looked into redistricting in Georgia, I was pretty astounded to learn that Georgia's constitution is incredibly vague about the timing of redistricting. Although we traditionally start redistricting after the census, the Constitution doesn't have a written deadline for completion, and there's no written provisions on how often redistricting can happen in between the census. So as a result, since 2006, the Supreme Court has allowed unlimited changing to maps. And what that has meant for Georgia voters is they have seen over 70 changes to congressional districts and General Assembly seats over that period. The way that it should work is obvious. Maps should be redrawn once in the year after the census and only changed if it is ordered by a court. If a court orders changes, only change the districts needed to correct the deficiencies identified by the court and make no other changes. Our proposed constitutional amendment codifies this common sense into law. I'm grateful again for the work of Fair Districts, and I am hopeful that in this moment when so much is at stake, that my colleagues in the General Assembly will give this proposal the consideration that it deserves. Thank you. We'll hear now from Ken Lawler with Fair Districts.
Hello, I'm Ken Lawler with Fair Districts Georgia. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that advocates for redistricting reform in the state of Georgia. We have been watching redistricting in this state for many, many years. We are grateful that at the moment, Georgia has not joined this national redistricting war. But I will tell you that it's not because we don't try, it's because we have a terrible history, a long history of changes. As Representative Draper said, about 70 changes in districts over the last 20 years without waiting for a census, without being compelled to do so by a court. These changes are made for one reason and one reason only, and that is for partisan gain. It's to make the election easier to win for somebody. That's not what voters want. Voters want competitive districts. They want competitive elections in the state of Georgia. Georgia is actually an outlier. If you look at how all the states across the country govern redistricting, for state legislative seats, the assembly, we're one of only 3 states where redistricting is tied to the census, but it is now permitted because of the court case back in '06. So we are an outlier there. And for congressional redistricting, our Constitution is extremely vague. Actually, our law is extremely vague. It just says, yeah, redistrict for Congress. But it doesn't say when. It doesn't tie it to the census. It's very, very vague. So by custom, these things kind of work. But then people get the bright idea that they want to change districts at a whim, and they've done it 70 times in the last 20 years. This has to stop. The bill, the resolution that Senator Parent and Representative Draper have introduced makes redistricting work the way it should. Every 10 years you have a census. Then you draw new districts, and then you have elections. That's how it ought to work. And this very simple change is bipartisan. It does not disadvantage or advantage either party. It simply says, make this work the way it's supposed to work, the way people think it should work. Today we are here, our team is here, talking to the members of the Senate and House redistricting and reapportionment committees. Our request is simple. The bill is in front of you. Hold a hearing. Just hold a hearing. Give the voters a choice. Now, because this is a constitutional amendment, it would go before the voters. I can almost guarantee you that voters are going to want this. So we want to have a hearing in the Senate and the House, have the bill heard, have it voted on, and then we will move on from there. Senator Parent and Representative Draper are making a point, which is Georgia can now stand up and lead the nation and say the madness must stop. We're going to stop our history, but we're going to tell the other states this is good governance. This is how it should be done. I'm going to turn the program over now to Chris Bruce, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is, good morning. And it's good to see y'all down at your capital. I am Christopher Bruce, the Deputy Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia, an organization dedicated to making sure that your voting rights are protected. So let's start off there. Let's stop pretending that this issue is complicated. This bill is about one thing: power. And the question before us is simple. Will power restrain itself, or will we put systems in place to protect us? History shows mid-decade redistricting has happened before, but history also shows what happens when politicians draw lines without real guardrails. They protect incumbents, silence communities, and distort our democracy. This is what we are here for right now. The resolution put forth before us by Senator Elena Parent and State Representative Syra Draper are here to make sure that those powers are put in place where it does not matter which party is in power. It matters that the people are in power. So today, the people behind me are saying enough is enough. Enough with politicians choosing their voters. Enough with backroom maps being drawn in the dark. Enough with whichever party who's in power bending the lines to make sure they stay in control. Today, with this bill, we're saying enough. And with that, we demand that change happens, and that starts with guardrails around any type of redistricting. Also here today, you have an amazing group, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the first Black Greek letter organization on any college campus, which the ACLU represents in the gerrymandering suit against the State General Assembly, because we know that gerrymandering happens. We know that Black voters have been disenfranchised, and we also know that we can do something about it. So I stand with those brothers like I stand with these good people behind me of saying enough is enough, and it's time for change. With that, I will pass it back to Senator Elena Parent for questions.
Thank you so much. We're happy to answer any questions from the media if there are any. Yeah. Great question. So the question was, Georgia has not engaged in the mid-cycle redistricting, thankfully, but there is a pending case before the Supreme Court that could further almost entirely gut, the remainder of the Voting Rights Act. And therefore the question was, are we concerned that Georgia might follow suit with sort of more unleashed gerrymandering if majority-minority districts are not legally required, as they have been since the civil rights era and the end of Jim Crow? Yes, I am extremely concerned. As a matter of fact, I would expect that they would redistrict. And as California and Texas show, when you've got states of 40, 50 million people, of very diverse political views and landscapes, and you can draw a delegation to the U.S. Congress that in California, you may remember the number, one of you may remember the number, but it's like, there'll be like 4 Republican seats and like 45 Democratic ones. When you can actually do that, it shows what could happen here. And it's the same thing with Texas. So it's very concerning, and I certainly want to let others respond to that.
Yeah, we are concerned, and I think we just need to call this what it is. I mean, we are relying now on the integrity of the people in this building to do the right thing. Should the Supreme Court go a certain way and allow for the further deterioration of the Voting Rights Act, should they choose to engage in mid-cycle redistricting, I mean, that is the equivalent of changing the rules in the middle of the game. And we know why that's happening. Look at the number of people who are retiring from Congress. They're stepping down because they see the writing on the wall. They see what's going to happen in the midterms. There is a president in office who is deeply unpopular and is not listening to the will of the people. Our democracy is supposed to function that if you have leaders that do not listen to the will of the people will choose somebody different to be in charge, and they will choose a different Congress to be in charge. The reason they are engaging in this kind of redistricting mid-game and trying to change the rules in the middle of the game is because they don't want to play fair. They don't want to be held accountable for the bad decisions they are making. They don't want to be held accountable to not listening to the people. We shouldn't have to depend on the integrity of folks here to do the right thing and to have our fingers crossed and hope they don't engage in this. I think that's why it is so important that we pass this constitutional amendment to codify this into law and hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Say something on the...
Yeah. I'll just add one comment, and that is that We cannot guess what the court's going to do. But I would suggest that if the court weakens the Voting Rights Act, Georgia would probably not be told to change districts, but there would be an opportunity to do so. It would be optional. The good news is this resolution stops it cold.
This is simple. Georgians deserve the right to vote without putting these guardrails in place, and that's why this is a constitutional amendment, because you deserve that. So you need to talk to your state representative and you need to talk to your state senator and demand that this get passed. This does not favor any party. It puts guardrails behind it. And with it being done, Georgia, your right to vote will be furthered.
Any other burning questions? I'll just add, you may already know this, but the Senate Democratic Caucus this morning did file a state-level Voting Rights Act that would restore the protections of the Civil Rights Act of 1965 if it is indeed gutted by the Supreme Court. And as a former Confederate state with a long history of voter suppression of Black citizens and a large Black population that fairly overwhelmingly tends to vote for Democrats, the risk is, of course, incredibly real, as this recent redistricting boondoggle has made very clear. Thank you all so much for joining us.